we have 4 div elements. Let's select the last div element and apply the dark green background color. So div last child and background color to dark green. So the last div element gets the dark green background color. Now, sometimes you might encounter a situation where the last element is not selected using the last child pseudo-class. Let's see the situation where the last div element doesn't receive the dark green background color. I have already explained this in the nth last child pseudo-class video, but let me clarify it again. So let's inspect the last div element. Now, for testing, let's include JavaScript library and see what happens. So I'm gonna go to Settings and JavaScript, and let's search for Lodash, which is a JavaScript utility library providing utility functions for common tasks for enhancing code readability and efficiency. We are not gonna use this Lodash library, but just to show you a situation with the last child, let's include this, and I'm gonna save and close. Now, when we save, the dark green background color is disappeared from the last div element. Let's see what is going on. So I'm gonna search for this, and right before the closing body tag, you can see that script tag is added here to import the Lodash library. Including JavaScript file using the script tag before the closing body tag is a common practice. And because of this, the last child is no longer this div element, but it is now this script tag. That's why our last child pseudo-class didn't select this last div element. Now let's remove the script tag. So go to Settings, JavaScript, and I'm gonna remove this Lodash and save. And now the last div element receives the dark green background color, because when we inspect this again, the script tag is removed, so that this div element becomes the last div element among this sibling group. So if you encounter a similar situation in the future, you know now why this is happening. To avoid this issue, let's put the elements inside a main element and include the main element as a parent in the selector as well. So here, main, and then also like so. This way, the script tag won't affect the last child pseudo-class because we are now scoping our selector inside this main element. Alright, now the last child pseudo-class is the same as nth last child 1. Let me update it to nth last child to see if it works the same. Nth last child 1, and it still selects the last div element. Cool. Let's change back to last child. Now let's comment out the style, and this time I'm going to wrap the third div element with another div, something like this. And then I'm gonna add one more div element like so. Now, when I uncomment this style, which element do you think will be selected? So let's uncomment, and this last div element, and then also this last div element from the third div element will be selected, because this div element is the last div element, so it is selected, and also this div element, which is this one, is the last div element among these sibling groups, so it is selected. Alright, let's comment out the style again, and I'm going to add div here. In this case, which element will be selected? Alright, so I am going to uncomment this, and none of the elements will be selected. So we are looking at the element under the main element, specifically the last div element, and then we are targeting the div element. However, the last div element, which is this one, and then also this one, don't contain any div element, so no element will be selected to receive the dark green background color. Alright, let's comment out again, and let's update the HTML, but let's close this. And then I'm going to add a div like so, and then also I'm gonna add one more div here like so. Now when I uncomment this style, which element do you think will be selected? Let's uncomment. And those two div elements will be selected. So let's take a closer look at it. So we start from the main element and then look at last div element. Since we didn't use the child combinator, the div last child pseudo-class is applied anywhere under the main element, including the child groups or grandchild groups. In the child group, which is this one, the last div element is this one, but it doesn't contain any div element. So none of the elements under this div element will be selected. Now, when we look at the grandchild group, which is this one, the last div element is this among this sibling group, and there are two div elements inside. So those two div elements will receive the dark green background color for this. Cool. Now, in this selector, when we add a child combinator after the main, like so, none of the elements will receive the dark green background color because we are explicitly looking at the last div element in the direct child group of the main element. So from this child group, the last div element is this one, but this div element doesn't contain any div element inside for this, so no elements will be selected. Now let's comment out the style, and I'm gonna remove this child combinator, and I'm gonna add nth child 3, and then add child combinator here, and then remove the div like so. When I uncomment this style, which element will be selected this time? Let's uncomment, and this div wrapper element will be selected. So we are looking at the div element at the third position and then targeting the last div element. So under the main, the third div element is this one, which is this box, and then child combinator, which means the direct child, but the last child, that means this one. So this div element will receive the dark green background color. As it only targets the direct child elements with the child combinator, those two child div elements won't be selected. Alright, that's how the last child pseudo-class works.